Hello, everyone, and welcome to this event where we will hear from a large number of neurodivergent poets. I'm not going to say very much. I'm just going to do a bit of quick housekeeping on behalf of Five Leaves Bookshop, who's running this event as part of Nottingham Poetry Festival. Please feel free to buy the books. NeurodiVERSE. I haven't actually got my copy of it. I've lost it. But someone wave it. Yeah, okay. Loads of people waving it. Brilliant. Please feel free to buy it. Buying links will be in the chat at some point throughout the event. We're not going to have a Q&A because there's so many of us reading. But if you put questions in the chat, we'll keep an eye on that and try and answer them for you as we go. Very quick thank you so much to Flapjack Press for creating this wonderful book, which I'm really proud to be involved with and part of. Thank you also to Janine for asking all our Beyond the Spectrum writers to contribute. We're really excited to have 7 writers from Beyond the Spectrum, which is a creative writing series of workshops run by Writing East Midlands in the East Midlands. And that's about it, basically. So I'm going to shut up and hand over to our wonderful hosts. And I believe Janine's going to speak first.
I think I am. Thank you very much, Pippa. And thank you for putting this event together to do the online launch of NeurodiVERSE, a marvellous anthology of writing by neurodivergent poets of all different shapes and sizes. I myself, I started doing poetry in the 1980s. When I had no idea I was neurodivergent, but was very much aware that I was weird and that poetry was a good way of expressing that. Then I stopped doing poetry for 25 years. But when I restarted again in 2014, I knew by then that I was autistic, which finding that out made my whole life make sense. And since then I found out I probably have ADHD as well. And being a poet and being neurodivergent, I really wanted to bring together neurodivergent poets. And of course, with an obvious title like NeurodiVERSE, the book had to be done just so we could use the title NeurodiVERSE. So we got well over 100 contributions, which were great. And we collected the greatest, the most excellent of them into what I think is a really splendid anthology. So I will hand over to another one of my co-editors, because I had the idea, I touted it around some other publishers who weren't interested. Boo, their loss. And then I asked Flapjack and they were very keen, and we decided we're bringing Kate and Rob to help us with this project as well and do the selecting and the organising together. So each of them is going to say a couple of words before we start, before we come back to me to introduce the first section. So I will hand over to you, Kate.
Thanks so much, Janine. And it was such an honour to be asked to be a part of editing this. I think it feels overwhelming in a good way, and also slightly in a, oh, my brain is exploding way, which so many of us know the feeling of. That there are so many of us neurodivergent poets all together in a Zoom room. Of course, there always were neurodivergent poets in rooms. That's why I felt at home among my tribe, and I didn't know exactly why until 2017 when I was diagnosed as autistic. And now I look forward to the massively high percentage of poets who are neurodivergent getting to know that as much as we all do. I think that's all I want to say for now. I'm so looking forward to hearing the poems. So hiya, Rob, some words from you.
Hello, thanks so much, Kate, and thank you, Janine, and thank you, Pippa and Five Leaves for putting this on. I'm overjoyed that we're putting it on, and especially so that we're doing it over Zoom in a way that's accessible to people around the country. It's great. I was diagnosed as having a neurodiverse condition when I was a music student, which was confusing for me at the time because the existence of neurodiverse implied the existence of a neurodichorus and a neurodimiddle 8. But anyway, 13 years later, I got into poetry and had the honour of being invited by Kate and Janine, two of my favourite poets in the world, to be a part of this. And seeing it come together over the past 12 months has really been a joy. Really got a sense of it's been really eye-opening. Learned a lot from the wonderful contributions people have made, and just to see the common threads and the solidarity amongst the poetry scene and amongst the neurodivergent community has been fantastic. So I'm really, really chuffed we're here tonight.
Okay, so we've arranged this book in sections because we see the book as entertaining, thought-provoking, platforming the voices of people who are often talked over and talked about rather than given a platform themselves, and also as an opportunity to maybe educate people about aspects of the neurodivergent experience. So we divide it into relevant sections. So we're going to divide this event into the relevant sections as well. The first section is called Growing Up. Noticing that you are different from other kids can be fascinating or bewildering. Your difference can be a delight, or it can be a pretext for bullying, or both. The structure of school requires a typical attention span, typical ways of communicating and learning, and typical sensory sensitivities. If yours are atypical, you have special needs, and the funding to meet these is disappearing fast. It's little wonder that neurodivergent kids are far more likely to be excluded from school or to leave with low or no qualifications. Neurodivergent children grow into neurodivergent adults, often to find very little recognition or support. And for our first poem, I'm going to hand over to Barry.
I had forgotten somehow that I once had wings. The aches I get across my chest are muscle memories of a painful loss. My feet are planted firmer on the ground each passing year, an earthbound crow hopping three-toed to officiate on all that matters beneath the sky. We shed our feathers with our childhood when we do not know their purpose, and only when our wings are gone do we remember that we can fly. And that was me. And I will be handing over to one Sarah L. Dixon.
Magical thinking. If this love heart lasts until I'm home, Indie Fringe will smile at me in maths. If I take exactly 383 steps from the school gate to my classroom door, Eki will give me a Christmas card and it will have a single X. If I read until page 18 of the MEN while doing my paper round, grey coat with red cuffs will be washing his mum's car. If I see my watch tick over to the hour, each hour for a week, Baker will kiss me. If I kiss every Take That poster, there are 108. At a different time each night for a year, Mark will want to marry me. If I cut through behind the tennis courts 3 times each way, even though it scares me, Brad from Neighbours will be reading on a deck chair, top off, eyes closed. Okay, and I'm handing over to Natalie Jane Clark.
Thank you. She's bright, but she talks too much. A room of 30, malleable minds and stretching flesh. 2 pupils stand out. He can't sit still, neither can I. He folds paper aeroplanes and makes them fly. My leg jogs and my doodles march over the margins, across my hands and up my wrists. He finds it hard to be quiet. So do I. He makes animal noises and plane noises and fart noises. It hurts me to let someone else answer a question. He never finishes his work. I struggle too, despite our love of learning. Sharp, but needs to put in more effort, is how we're both described. Ideas rush too much, our brains stall and stutter. No letter written looks much like another. We both receive recurring detentions for never doing homework. We both lose or crumple or forget our notes. We both have the occasional meltdown at the hint of negative feedback. We were in the same classes from the age of 4 to 16. Guess who got diagnosed at 8 and who was diagnosed at nearly 30? You're right. The latter was me, the she. You see, he fit the classic criteria of ADHD. I mean, look, I did too. But although our symptoms were often the same, his manifested in ways that affected others more, whilst mine often turned inwards or were hidden at home, masking and coping and pedaling faster, drowning in junk and shame. Society's perceptions and expectations of our genders are vastly, vastly different, not to mention the gender data gap. The lack of knowledge about the condition affects everybody. Only through other ADHD women on the internet, their honesty, their research, their silly humor, their campaigning to dispel myths, did I discover why I am the way I am. So I'm going to take this chaotic energy and fight and shout and teach and try to make things right for others needing answers too. Thank you so much. And I'm going to pass over to Kate.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Natalie. I so much identified with that. And I'm having a bit of an ADHD realization myself, which is I really couldn't focus on what anybody was saying until I started reading along with the poems, which is possible to do with this handy book right here. So I'm going to introduce the next section, Home and Family, which is so resonant for so many of us in so many ways. I'm going to read the introduction that Janine brilliantly wrote. I'm just going to read it straight, I think. Most people don't learn about neurodivergence until it makes itself known among their friends or family. Parents, carers, and significant others may struggle with little support or understanding and precious few resources and services. There's a heritable component to neurotypes, and so neurodivergent people may well have similarly neurodivergent relatives. They may find understanding and comradeship at home, or they may find rejection or efforts to normalise them. Social institutions often talk over us to our families, seeking their views, not ours. We want our families and friends to be heard, but we want to be heard as well. Now then, the next bloke I'd already heard of. How exciting. Please, let's welcome Henry Normal.
Thank you very much, Jane. And I'm very honoured to have a poem selected to go in the book. This is Summer on Pluto. In a room with no windows, I'm given a leaflet. The word incurable is printed in bold on the first page. This is the only time I will spend in this room. This is the only time I will speak to this person. Autism is a spectrum. There are degrees. Your son is mildly severe. Mildly severe. What does that mean? It means he will always live at home. It means he will never have a job, never have a girlfriend, never be capable of taking care of himself. You will never have a conversation with him, ever. It means you will worry about him every day. You'll worry if he's happy. You'll worry if he's lonely. You'll worry what will happen to him when you die. Mildly severe, benignly savage, kindly cruel. None of this appeared on the leaflet. I'd like to hand over to Philippa Blakey.
I just want to say what a thrill it is to be after Henry Normal, one of my poetry heroes. So that's very exciting for me. This is tick here for single parent household. There are rarely single purpose journeys. Some are no purpose, bewildered meanderings, poorly regulated attempts to flush out the cortisol, rock the pain, back and forth. Pacing a disarming dining room of half-finished situations, of breaks and breakthroughs, shame and order, delight and disarray. The kitchen calls without much clarity, whilst the washing basket makes a distant case. I meet an adult here sometimes who could write you 3,000 words of sparkling praxis in 72 hours, who persuades whole groups of appliances to hum compliant, who lights candles and waters plants. I saw her hoovering beans once and I thought, my God, you are incredible. Go on, finish that book. Meal, thought, conversation, career plan, relationship, therapy. You deserve it. Thank you. I'd like to hand over to Carl Knight.
Hi, gang. Hopefully everyone can hear me. I'm going to read a sonnet called Great Nanny, which kind of explains itself. Great Nanny. Dad carries me up the stairs to her flat. As soon as he's gone, she hands me a pair of headphones so I can ignore her chirping budgie. She doesn't insist on looking her in the eye or giving her a hug. She knows I'm always listening. To her, I'm Carl Knight, no inside voice and perfect crooked bones. She tells me about Margaret from Iceland again. We play snap, but I go slow to let her win. She never slammed her hand down and yelled, snap. It was always a small laugh and two wrinkled knuckles would tap the cards. When it's time to leave, she gives me £1. I go down the stairs on Dad's shoulders, holding her coin between my fingers. And that's a sonnet, and you'll find many, many other forms of poems in this book, which you should buy. And I will hand you over to hear another poem. I'll hand you over to Spencer Mason.
Hi, thanks very much, Carl. And yeah, thanks very much. It's such a pleasure to be here. I had a panic attack at work this morning, so it feels really nice to be able to do something that feels so rich and accommodating, and with an amazing collection of neurodiverse people. So this is a poem I contributed called My Unfortunate Daughter. Come, my dearest sweet, come willing with smoke, come and stitch yourself by the fire here and help yourself to talk. How can you see these flames, my dear, and how they dance in tribunal for you, or do you only see the anger from when they took all you had left to lose? Now, my mind as you got older, you learned all of your own accord, but you always kept Dundee's rebel heart and never did what you were told. No, you always slept so sound and sweet it seemed, forever dreaming true and bold. Yet I know these nights have gotten darker as you have gotten old. Now they considered it genetics, dear. I gave thee all I had to give, and all those that plagued me are now in your soul to live. I know you cry at night, my brave. I know these terrors and these frights. I know how these voices convene and connive, convince you of what is right. They've been around a while, my dear. I have seen this all before. I know these things that you feel and that you fear, and that your heart has become torn between moral questions of deserving love. Your callousness doubting you'll be enough to find a humble suitor or honest heart who hears your song like pure white doves. I ken such things can always be, as you beg and barter with your fear to fade to gratify your plea. But you must not be captive, my dear, lest you ever doubt yourself. Let your dreams be courage to reap, and I will stay here beside the fire, my love. I will stand guard as you sleep. Thank you very much. I'll hand you back to the hosts with a massive thank you for organising such a special event. Cheers.
Wow. That was absolutely spellbinding. How to move on from that. Thank you to everyone who's performed so far. We're going to move on to the next section of NeurodiVERSE, and we're going to move on to the work section. So work, the world of work for many neurodivergent people is something through which they're given the mold and told to fit into, and it's something that aren't given the adjustments that they often need for. So 21.7% of working age autistic adults are in paid work, the lowest rate of all disability categories. People with ADHD are twice as likely to have been dismissed from a job than people without. Work is organised to maximise profit, usually structured in strict and hierarchical ways with little control by workers, presenting difficulties to those who think differently. Many trade unions are taking up the issue of neurodiversity in the workplace, demanding more accessible and inclusive workplaces and supporting individual workers. Paraphrase Karl Marx, neurodivergent workers have thus far had to navigate, suffer, or avoid the workplace. The point is to change it. Pertinently, I'm moving on to somebody you may well have heard of, the wonderful poet, trade unionist and activist, Janine Booth.
Thank you very much. So, you ever wondered why so few autistic adults are in paid employment? This poem is called We Had to Let Them Go. He worked alone, not a team player, not a keeper or a stayer. Didn't fit in, not really our sort. Talked about boring stuff, not sport. We had to let him go. She didn't smile, service with a frown, missed the big picture, always drilling down, flapped her hands, rocked and hummed, chewed her pen and sucked her thumb. We had to let her go. Profit margins were getting low. We didn't want to let them go, but some things we just can't afford. We can't keep funding his support. We had to let him go. Wasn't friendly, never spoke, lost her temper, can't take a joke, had some really weird obsession, didn't give a good impression. We had to let her go. She wouldn't put in the extra hours, no party tricks or superpowers, too quiet, too loud, too fast, too slow. Everyone said she had to go. Great at the actual job, to be fair. Well, yeah, but we had to let them go. And I'm handing on to Robert.
Thank you very much, and hello and welcome from Devon. Here we are. This is a poem called On a Poet Discovering He's Dyslexic Just Before His 47th Birthday. It's not that the words danced around, it's just that there were too many of them. Some sentences so convoluted my head would shut down like a fizz of static on an old TV. I'd overheat, sweat pouring from my brow. I'm a poet, right? Words are meant to be my playthings, but it just felt more that they were playing with me, toying with me, hiding the truth behind the very words which the more competent people around me were using to convey that very truth. Doesn't a bad worker always blame their tools? In management meetings, words, too many of them. Too many concepts, too much abstraction piled and peppered in paragraphs on the page. They bland themselves into the bland ground, and I try to pick them out, catch them, these multisyllabic monsters plucked between thumb and forefinger, and I'd scream, I know what you mean individually, but together it's all nonsense. For goodness sake, just behave. And I'd leave the meeting, the lesson, the symposium, the convention, the workshop, the lecture, the presentation, hot and sweaty and thinking everyone around me were superheroes because they understood everything at the very first attempt. And now we come on to socio-economic considerations in means-tested arts funding community-based stakeholder applications. And I'd have absolutely no idea. And I'd ask someone, and they knew every nuance. So I'd pretend that I did too. Perhaps I always knew something were amiss. I could never take directions or phone calls or even simple instructions without writing it down and rereading it 5, 6, 7 times. Now just slow down, let me write this, let me make some notes. What do you mean you're not going over it a second time? Those bloody words again. You're meant to be my friends. Sure, I can write like no one's business and tap dance on the very precipice of literary expression, but open my mouth and I'm about as erudite as a stunned slug. You see that line I just wrote there? I could never have uttered that in real life. It takes me the best part of a morning to come up with something so spontaneous. This whole time, I thought that words were my friends, but close my eyes and they dance. It turns out they were always there. They were just cheating on me. Well, thank you very much. And I'd love to now hand over to Rob.
Hello. That was absolutely marvellous, Robert. That was brilliant. Access to work. This piece is about reasonable adjustments within the workplace, the means through which the playing field is supposedly leveled for people with support needs. To whom it may concern, please see attached to read and take into consideration our client's needs assessment, from which we make some recommendations. Our client is in hope that they will meet implementation. Our client gave his consent for us to share this information. Our client tells us that he holds a firm commitment to his work. His responsibilities to those he serves he will not shirk. Amidst the mist of tentativeness, he's tenacious but now irked by insidious cynicism on him management besmirched. We're here to convey his support needs and provide some helpful pointers to increase your awareness of which course seems to be cloisters. He reports he's asked for adjustments and just been left to loiter until the workload shit hits client's fan, at which point he's exploited. Having asked for clearer instructions and feeling doomed to fail, puzzled why manager replied all, chiding him in an email. He's floated forth in leaky raft, equipped with ripped up sail, and told to learn to navigate whilst battling a gale. Your poorly explained tasks, the worst possible cards you're dealing. With his focused dwarf by disorientated, doomy feelings, when sensitivity to oral stimuli leaves client reeling, you amplify your obnoxious office singing while he's concealing. Determination outgunned and frustration escalating. Feeling undermined, you ignored the needs that he has been stating. When he reads text appears to be oscillating, you joked in front of the whole team that he must be hallucinating. When patronised, dismissed, scrutinise are three favourite tactics in managing a worker who's trying to bear being dyspraxic. Your attitude and approach have become at best problematic. Please see our specific suggestions, which we hope you adopt in practice. Your indiscreet haranguing over 5-minute lateness should cease immediately. For a client, grasping time can be like grasping handlebar on a bicycle whilst lathered in butter, and our findings are that this has come at a significantly higher cost to him than you. The working time deficits amounts to hours owed by the employer to the employee on the account of dozens of hours of unpaid overtime he's given. On that basis, we suggest a payout equivalent to 2 months' salary to compensate for said overtime, and for the indignity of being harangued over such inconsequential matters in a public way. A screen overlay, adaptive software, instructions in flowchart format, and greater consideration of the unnecessary noise you make while singing in the office are reasonable adjustments, not things that our client should be bullied into feeling privileged for having been granted, or things that he should have insinuated will be paid for from deductions from his salary. We suggest you gain a greater understanding of our client's condition and what constitutes reasonable adjustments for this. Other members of our client's team understanding instructions to a task more quickly than our clients is not a sign of our client's inadequacies. It is a sign that you have perceived the inadequacies of your own approach to management. You're patronising insinuations that our client is either dim or lazy, cease immediately, as aside from being completely superfluous to the remit of a manager, they're damaging, demeaning, and discriminatory. We suggest you wind your fucking neck in with these. Please do not hesitate to contact us for any further information relating to this. Warmest regards, the Access to Work team. Thank you. I am going to move back to our wonderful, wonderful the person whose idea this was their brainchild. Over to Janine Booth.
Thank you very much, Rob, and thanks for an excellent section of poetry about work. And I've been joined by Minnie the cat, appropriately, because it has been theorised that all cats are autistic. And of course, all dogs have ADHD. So expect them to join me as well, because there are some of those running around the house. However, we're going to move on to our next section now. And our next section is about, oh, she's off. The next section is about fitting in. We don't fit in. We are not normal. But is there really such a thing as normal? If everyone were the same, then the world would be very boring. Neurodivergent people often find ourselves on the outside, whether that's through explicit prejudice or social exclusion. We may behave in unusual ways, for example, stimming, which is short for carrying out self-stimulatory actions such as flapping or skipping that help us to regulate. We might not even fit the stereotype of a typical atypical person. Not every autistic person is a nerdy white boy. Not every person with Tourette's shouts out swear words. Intolerance causes discrimination and distress in encounters with the justice system. Our difference becomes guilt. Our lack of eye contact arouses suspicion. The way we answer questions is misinterpreted to incriminate us. So to start off the section on fitting in, I'm going to hand over to Graham. No, to Jill, sorry. I'm going to hand over to Jill, and then we'll be Graham.
Thank you very much, Janine, and everybody who's made both this book and this event happen. I had a conversation a while ago with Kate Fox about autistic poems. Do you have to have the theme of autism in your poems? And she said, no, because if you are autistic, they're in everything you do. And almost all of my poems were written before I started to realise that I'm autistic about 3 years ago. And so when the call out came for this book, I had a look to see what I had, and yeah, it's there in pretty much all my poems. So it was hard to narrow down. And here is the one that was selected. It's called Pretender. Natalia has a flat stomach and a cleavage. She runs a mile without breaking a sweat. Heads turn even when she's dressed in rags. People recognize Natalia and remember her name. When she speaks, they listen. All her messages get prompt replies. Natalia never waits to get served at the bar. Cars stop to let hers out. She gets voted into office, sought out on Saturday nights. Natalia's paintings hang in homes of people she's never met. Certificates hang in her own. She has more letters after her name than in it. Natalia is always first up and cheerful. Her book is on the school curriculum. Natalia can quote Keats. Thank you. This, in a way, is part of my coming out because I got my formal diagnosis a month ago. And so when I did my bio for this book, I didn't mention it, but now I feel I'm out and proud. So now let's turn the page and welcome Graham Rogers.
Okay, this is my entry. It's called Confessions of a Stimmer. I am the painter, hands brushing, jabbing, scraping. I am the conductor, arms reaching, pointing and waving. I am the pianist, fingers poking, tapping, drumming. I am the dancer, legs pacing, twisting, stomping. I am the vocalist, lips cussing, whistling, scatting. I am the imposter, mask covering, acting. baking. And I hand it back over to Katie.
Thanks, Graham. And I think your poem reminds me that actually I realised doing poems is a form of verbal stimming for me, very much. So I'm going to introduce the fifth section, my brain. Neurodivergent brains work in atypical ways, not flawed or faulty. They are wired or structured differently from the majority. They may process at different speeds and focus in different ways. They may prefer words to numbers or vice versa. This brings strengths as well as challenges. For example, evidence shows that dyslexic people have spatial reasoning abilities significantly better than average, perhaps explaining why the late Richard Rogers and so many other dyslexic people are successful architects. I didn't know that. I knew loads of dyslexic people are performance poets, didn't know they're architects as well. But we still name this neurotype after the commonly known difficulty with written words. We don't call it enhanced spatial reasoning syndrome. Brain science is still in its early days. We hope that developing knowledge about the natural variation in human neurology will bring more acceptance and appreciation of this difference. But until then, we've got poems. More poems next from Beyond the Spectrum workshop member and fellow diagnosed as autistic in her 40s person, Anne Penn.
Thank you. I'd like to dedicate this poem to my mother, Marjorie Penn. Thought experiment. Nothing will change between today and tomorrow, apart from our knowledge. For us, the experiment is still in progress, but the result is already fixed. The pendulum is held taut mid-swing, and my stomach is rigid as well, tense for the roller coaster swoop of gravity. The carriage is preparing to set off, and we will discover if we will soar or drop. I'm a fly trapped in amber, frozen in this moment of time, existing in a state of suspended animation. If I had a choice, I don't know which I'd pick, staying in limbo, waiting for judgment, or leaping into the unknown future. I've always hated uncertainty, so the answer should be easy. Yet I've had 10 years to practice living with this stage, and I fear that new knowledge now will merely bring more change and trauma. But we have no say in this. The result is already fixed and nothing we can do can change it. The sand in the egg timer has nearly run through and we must march onwards towards tomorrow and open the box to discover the truth. Thank you. And I'd now like to hand over to Lucy Power.
So this is a poem in the voice of Sally Traffic, who used to present the traffic reports on BBC Radio 2, and it's called Sally Traffic Reports on the Neurological Effects of Multiple Sclerosis. Rising temperatures today are causing delays and a lack of concentration. There are closures on routes between mouth and brain, creating a tailback of non sequiturs and general misunderstanding, whilst problems around putting one foot in front of the other are adding 20 minutes to most journeys. On the stretch between fingertip and shoulder, numbness has affected driving and fastening small buttons. Meanwhile, cues anti-clockwise between head and all regions have resulted in problems remembering anything important. From lunchtime onwards, there is a one-way system in place. Fog in the optic area has led to reduced visibility. People are advised to avoid tiny writing, threading needles, and foreign films with subtitles. Noisy diversions during school runs are generating widespread confusion, and faulty signals have caused a lack of balance. During these severe conditions, maintain space around you. All routes between head, hands, and feet will be closed for the weekend following a day of overdoing it and a late night watching box sets. If you're heading out today, keep confidence and self-belief fully inflated to minimize the risk of punctures, because fatigue has led to extensive congestion. For much of the time, you won't know if you're coming or going. Thank you. The next poet is Zoe Siobhan Howarth Lowe.
Thank you, Lucy. Thank you everyone for having me. My poem was inspired by conversations with my little boy, and this is Memory Shells. Inside my brain, I am constructing memory shells. So many thoughts, jumbling, tumbling, rumbling, rolling around. 1,000 loose marbles, angry bees, humming for honey, and an elephant sitting in my ear, slurping noisily. And I'm going to hand back to the hosts. Thank you, everyone.
That was fantastic, Zoe. Brilliant. So we're on to the next section. The next section of the book is regarding communication. Communication being something that there are a lot of inaccurate illusions around with when it comes to people with neurodivergent conditions. Communication is by definition a process involving more than one person, but when it breaks down, it's usually the person with the minority communication style who is judged to be at fault. Different people communicate differently. Some people find it easier to communicate and to speak than to write. Some people prefer visual representations to printed words. Some people rely on gestures to communicate. Others do not. Some autistic people do not speak, but that does not mean they do not communicate. Naoki Higashida's 2007 book, The Reason I Jump, and the 2020 film with the same name offer insight into non-speaking autistic ways of communication and experiences of the world. I want to pass on from there to Jackie Carpenter. Over to Jackie.
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much. My poem is called If I Had a Magic Potion. I'd want it to blot out all the words that people don't really mean, redacting them with low blurs, gaps, and maybe some words would survive. It would be fun. Some small talk might creep through because sometimes I really do mean nice to see you or great look. The potion is made from a healthy dose of truth, a smidge of self-respect, a big top-up of purity. Take a small, sturdy glass. Start with your base of heavy truth, plopping doughy into the glass. Sprinkle on a tang of self-respect. Stir in the red fizz of purity like blood orange San Pellegrino. To mix, squash the truth against the glass. Enjoy its silly putty fart noises. Drink down in one. There is no smell. You only see, can't taste the effervescent orange. Less flavour than water. How you feel when you drink it depends on who you are. The wholehearted feel invigorated, uplifted. A sly trickster would feel dark, churned up, as though they were just starting with food poisoning, not quite sure what will come out of where. And now I'm going to hand over to Tracy Smith.
Thanks, Jackie. This piece is entitled Flow, written to celebrate my artistic hyperfocus. Flow, hammering out a rhythmic beat, tap, 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 flow. Intense focus, laser detail, the writer orchestrates her vision, flow. Energized interest, full immersion, spotlighted, laptop glow, flow. Words fill the screen, black on white, craft absorption, flow. Thank you. I'll now hand over to Kate Fox.
Thanks, Tracy. This is sort of about trees, but not really about trees. It's about autistic people. But it was inspired by discovering that trees talk to each other under the ground. What could be called communication. You might find them staying near the walls or clutching their earphones, rocking from foot to foot and looking just above their audience. They might be wincing at sirens, saying pardon a lot in crowds, clutching the rails on angled walkways, wondering at the calm faces of everybody else. Sometimes they rest a foot on a crossed ankle in such a way that others will click love in recognition when one of them writes a Facebook post about it. They might have coloured lenses or squint perpetually into the sun. They think everyone can see the fluorescent lights humming. Their eyes dart or fix, so they might be called evasive or invasive. They're stroking a finger, twiddling with their hair, tearing up paper, something with a mesmerising rhythm. They do not always recognise each other. They were often to be found clustered around tea urns, outside where it's quiet, in wombs, so they can perpetuate their tangents and straight lines, build forests of themselves, where they communicate under the soil, sending micellar releases of carbon and water to those who need them, passing on survival tips, encouragement, warnings, impulses of sound and light. And I'm going to hand back over now to Janine for our penultimate section.
And our penultimate section is on senses. Neurodivergent people often have atypical sensory sensitivities. We may be more or less sensitive than typical people are to light, to sounds, colours, textures, pain, tastes, and more. We may have intense interests and find that certain sensory inputs disrupt that, or the sheer amount of sensory input may overwhelm us. Some neurodivergent people are sensory seeking, particularly enjoying certain textures, sounds, or other sensations. Our sensory experience may be intense and satisfying, and being prevented from accessing it can be very unpleasant. Some neurodivergent people have synesthesia, meaning that their brains interpret one type of sensory input through another. They may hear colours, or they may taste sounds. Handing over now to Rachel.
Thank you, Janine. This is partly to do with synesthesias. It's called autistic chameleon. She is the swirling colours of oil on water, each view a different tone. Purples, blues, grey to black and pink, iridescent in the streetlights. She moves like a hammock strung between apple trees. Her swaying simultaneously stimulates and soothes in the soft evening air. She is the cloak that enfolds my body, protecting me from the elements as I walk along the seawall, breathing in such angry spray. She's a murmuration of starlings, swooping, turning, creating meaning in shapes as night gathers them to their roosting sites. She is the power of water to move from solid ice through surging water, and when heat is applied, steam. Thank you. I'm handing back to Rob.
Hello, that was fantastic, Rachel. It was absolutely brilliant. So we are on to the final section of the book. The section that we've come to conclude on is social interaction. I'm going to read the introduction to the section in the book. There's just a little bit I'd like to highlight. One of the wonderful contributors who isn't here with us today, but they are nonetheless an incredible poet. I'm talking, of course, about Tom Juniper. Just a section from their contribution, Autisticus. Well, then, how about we're not a piece of a jigsaw you're trying to solve, and if you saw what we saw, wouldn't be trying to take it away with a fix or a cure or a vaccine to blame. That contribution is available in the book. It's absolutely wonderful. Interacting with other people can be difficult and can be exhausting. Keeping up with sarcasm, gestures, figures of speech, and the code ways in which other people often behave can be like navigating a never-ending maze. Leading theorists of autism have declared that autistic people have no theory of mind, that we cannot understand how other people think. But others have better understood the issue, pointing out that it works both ways, that typical people have as much difficulty understanding atypical people as the other way. Autistic academic Damien Milton calls this the double empathy problem. I'm going to pass over to the wonderful, wonderful Pippa Hennessy, who has helped put on this wonderful, wonderful event. Over to Pippa.
Can't help feeling he's talking about another Pippa Hennessy, but there you go. Okay, so my poem is called Superior Temporal Gyrus, and I should probably explain what that is before I read it. It's an area of the brain which contains the auditory cortex, which is important for things like language comprehension, social cognition processes, and it's probably where things like auditory processing disorder come from, a slightly atypical wiring of that part of the brain. And this poem's kind of about that, kind of about autism, kind of about communication. Anyway, and it's also in 3 voices. So let's see how well I do with that. Tonight, we're meeting at a party. You invited me the month before last. The glow of inclusion, I'll get to see friends. I haven't seen Sue since 2016. We're meeting at a party. You say it's easy to find. Walk towards town, turn right by the pub, take the 3rd left, 5th house on the right. Your instructions melt, spread in all directions. I ask you to draw a map. Okay, if I must. We're meeting at a party. I'd rather pull out my toenails. I remember now why I haven't seen Sue. That time in the pub, she said chavs are scroungers. I called her on it. You poured vodkas down her, drowning ranted insults. I long to spend the evening by the fire with a book. Tonight, we're at a party. Voices stab at my ears, music rattles my bones. Sue's in the kitchen talking to you. Rhubarb, 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 blah, blah, blah. Your words drown in a whirlpool of sound. Tonight, we went to a party. Now we're walking home, turning left by the pub. My bones still shudder, my ears still bleed. You're talking to me. Gabble, 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 gabble. What did you say? After drawn out moments, I process your words. Yes, thank you so much. A wonderful time. Tonight, I wish I hadn't gone to a party. Would I have understood the crackling flames and the quiet turn of pages? Thank you. I'll pass over to S. Reeson now for the next poem.
Thank you very much, Pippa, and thank you ever so much for giving me the opportunity to read. This is fantastic, thank you. But let's be honest, some days it's all just a mess. This is nothing here is working anymore. Here, unsocial pretend not, instead, minds the cafe, some small busy shop where previously all those people stood should piss right off. Between cloth mask and now, protective layer, sanitizer, nuking every germ that's owned. Suddenly a wrench to be alone. Truth appears, once famous person hater, happily admitting failure. Resonance, togetherness, lies lost between first need for safety, common sense. Second, inescapable as circumstance, still on my own. Don't make them zoom. Can't control those terms. Stuck in a square. Digital possession overwhelms. Egregious in tortures placed. Everything in cyberspace. Instead, please, heartbeats, random thrives, in which all this becomes survives, then everything will be the same as one. Thank you. And I'm going to hand over to Louise Wilding.
Hi, thank you. This is Strange and Broken Forms. I hear you. I hear everything. The rain drumming on the windows, the buzzing of computers, the air conditioning ruffling the paper on my desk. Your voice swims in a sea of distraction that my ears as nets fail to catch. I watch your eyes roll. their derision scything the buds of my confidence and shrink in the shame of knowing I've disappointed you. Recoiling deeper into the shadows of myself, away from the electric glare of your annoyance. I bend my reality to fit your expectations. I squeeze myself smaller and smaller to fit within the confines of my box, my place. My body aches with the strain of it, and yet it's my exhausted mind that's expected to climb the hills of your incomprehension. Why can't you bend your reality and pull me into the bright skies of understanding, of your understanding? Why do you expect these tired arms to do all the heavy lifting when they can barely traverse this conversation? You demand attention. I request awareness, less able to comprehend your words when forced to stare into the iron grip of your gaze. Witness to your dissatisfaction, prisoner of your condescension. Hauling yourself above me, using the derision of others, you build a pedestal as all-encompassing and as fragile as your ego. Gilded in self-satisfaction, raised by your own weakness, you build monuments to the thoughtlessness of your words. Scaled by those forced to carve themselves into strange and broken forms. Unnerved by my resistance, terrified of the minor inconvenience assisting me may require, you wage wars with those too terrified to resist and call that victory. I am listening. I do hear you. Everything you're not saying. Thank you. I'm going to pass over to Artie, and I hope I'm saying that right.
Hello. My poem is called I Can't Speak, and I wrote it in my second year of university, a good few years before I had any idea I was autistic. A lot of it is visual as well, so I recommend you need to buy it to see it, to sort of get the other half of what it's like, the feeling of it. I'll go now. I can't speak to you right now. I wish I could. My words are strangled in my throat. I need you right now. This is the only way I can tell you. I have to text you. You should sleep. You have work. I guess you are mad. I've never done this before. Normally I'm forced to respond. I know you're not. No one knows when I'm like this. It's hard to tell someone when you've gone nonverbal, when you don't want to speak. Easier to give short answers. I want to tell you though, I just can't speak. I cried last night. My thoughts were loud. They were too loud. I'll probably have more nightmares. I will. I will wake you. If I need you. I'm sorry I can't say it. Good night. Thank you, and I shall pass back over to the host, Janine.
And that brings us to the end of this event. Very neatly fitted into an hour. She'll make a very nice video, which you will be able to watch afterwards and point your friends and contacts to who weren't able to watch us do our thing live, but will be able to watch it on the Five Leaves YouTube channel. So it only remains for me to say, buy the book. It only remains for me to say thank you to all the poets who've contributed to the book. Buy the book. Thank you very much to Paul Neads, who, unlike the previous publishers I pitched it to, saw value in this project and then saw it through with incredibly hard work. And I think, getting me, Kate and Rob to be co-editors was a stroke of genius, but it was also like volunteering to herd cats. So well done to Paul for managing that as well. We are doing little gigs associated with this anthology. So if you fancy putting on an event where you live, maybe there's a regular poetry night there, or maybe you want to do a one-off thing. Maybe there's a bookshop that's nice, like 5 Leaves, and wants to host an event. Get in touch with us via Flapjack Press, and what we'll do is we will locate the poets who contributed to the anthology in your area, and we'll see if we can get them along to do a talk. We've already done that in Manchester once. I think we're going to be doing it in Manchester again. We're going to be doing it in Edinburgh. We're going to be doing it in Brighton. Yeah, maybe we can do it in your neck of the woods as well. So please get in touch if you'd like us to do that. But finally, it really does remain only for me to say, buy the book, and thank you very much for coming. Cheers.
Hi, my name is Andy N. The piece I'm going to do today is a true story, told about over my childhood into my 20s, really, because certainly when the case of myself when I got dyspraxia, I was nearly 29 actually, and I actually was in second year at university at Bolton Institute, now Bolton University, and I never knew it. I never actually hand on my heart knew I had dyspraxia. So this is a poem that talks about that situation leading up to that and what went beyond it. And it's simply called Between Then and Now, a life before and after the discovery of dyspraxia. They never said I was stupid in my exams at university, but I knew from the results I got back with the letter U, staring at me in the face, or marks that weren't much better. They would have dismissed me as a waste of space. They never said when at a warehouse or grocer's after leaving school on a youth training scheme, even when I struggled to read where to file everything, and sent me back just saying I wasn't right. Poultry operative, kitchen porter, drifted through my teens and 20s, buried in confusion that tangled curtains over words, fighting through evening classes to re-educate myself, turning into the first year at university, grasping through the wastelands of sleep, spending twice as long as everybody else of essays, blackmailing myself to carry on with guilt. Marooned with dyspraxia, my lecturer said I was, the word turning over my tongue in the rain, pulling the outline of my life out into the open, instead of simply kicking the ladder away again. Changing the tune and song, halfway through unmapping the mysteries and the fog of my thoughts with a slow intake breath of relief, stopping me driving back through the rain again. Alone.
Hi there. Greetings from the southwest of France. I'm sorry I can't be there tonight for the book launch. Wish you all well, but sadly our internet has gone down and they can't get an engineer here until Saturday. So I'm having to record this and then take it down to our local cafe and send it via their broadband. Making a Spectacle of Yourself by Jeff Price. As a child, his fat spectacles would frequently slip from his pustulated face. Picked last at school sports with a reputation as the world's worst goalkeeper. Cockeyed pictures on pub walls distract him to the point of anger. He'll make a mental note to bring a spirit level to the next Friday night out. He'd prefer a world where beauty was literal and people were honest. Deviousness can catch his ankles and send him crashing to the ground. He can take an eternity to be spontaneous and can quickly prevaricate. He can feel awkward and unsure in the company he so often craves. Words dance on book pages and the order of their letters often elude him. But he loves them with a passion it took him years to acknowledge. He is a one-man play where he has many parts. None of them suit him. Yet he is the sum of all of them, and an eager apprentice at each one in turn.
So my poem Dreamcoat is about my synesthesia and my sensory processing condition. Don't label me disorderly because I'm wrestling with parasite-coated arms. I'm chewing scouring pads. I'm inhaling prickly pears. Don't tell me to cut it out. You think I haven't tried? I'm seeing symbols again. The stars are C-sharp minor. My collar's made of pins, each thread hand-stitched by fire ants. This porcupine around my neck is rendering me irate. Quick, unpick it from this straitjacket's nape. I've got my eye on Joseph's coat. It sings to me in spirals, but he won't play, let's pretend, with the girl who swallows spiders. My condition is critical, so don't be alarmed if my skin bleeds tangerine and bruises technicolor.
Friday is indigo, velvet on the bare soles of your feet, and each day of the week its own colour. The word fern makes your mouth water, unfurling in lime sherbet fronds, tingling under your earlobes. As you grow by each layer of pearl, you realise this isn't how it is for everyone. How do others navigate this world? As you sketch an animal, you feel the lines trace onto your body, slip into the sensation of its movement. As you write a landscape, that line of distant hills, your shoulders, fields of rippling wheat, your moving skin. The word life is clear, a chalk stream, bright with water plants and minnows. The word death is sparkling graphite, holding a blue light in its centre. Gardens sing, words are adventures. You follow the iridescence through your own purling story.